So the last video lecture for this week's reading list is on John Keats. So as I said in the video about Keats for the common reading week for Romanticism, Keats is probably the greatest of the Romantic poets. Again, he died very young. He was a sort of natural poetic genius, produced some of the best poems in the history of English literature, and he was probably the most sort of exemplary melancholic poet, because, again, he had this sort of constant foreboding of death, which, of course, again, was justified as it turned out, unfortunately. And so the three poems that I asked you guys to read for this week are When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be, La Belle Dame sans Merci, a Ballad, and Ode on Melancholy. So I want to jump right in because these are three complex poems and three interesting poems. So When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be, this is page 911, by the way. I talked about this a little bit in the overview video. This is a Shakespearean sonnet form, which does not actually mean it was written by Shakespeare. There are three main sonnet forms, but a sonnet itself is a 14-line poem consisting of a specific rhyme scheme. It's written in iambic pentameter. The term sonnet itself is derived from the Italian. It means little love song. So sonnets are traditionally love songs. And we get that as well in When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be. The three different sonnet formats, Petrarchan, Spenserian, and Shakespearean or Elizabethan, are distinguished by their different rhyme schemes. So the rhyme scheme for a Shakespearean sonnet, and you can follow this in When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be, is A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So we have three quatrains, and a quatrain is a 4-line section of a poem designated either by a stanza break or by a distinct rhyme scheme or something like that. So A, B is one quatrain, C, D is one quatrain, E, F is one quatrain, and then we have a final couplet. A couplet would be either a 2-line stanza or a 2-line rhyme scheme thing. So G, G, think and sink, lines 13 and 14. Also, sonnets tend to have what's called a volta, or a turn, and this is usually located between lines 8 and 9. So usually when we break from the second quatrain into the third quatrain, you have a turn. And this turn is usually thematic, sometimes it's content-based, sometimes it's style-wise, but it is a shift from one idea or one sort of development to another. So in When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be, the first 8 lines are focused on anticipating the loss of poetic skill and poetic expression. He says here, this is the beginning of the poem, When I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain, before high-piled books and charactery hold like rich garners the full ripened grain, when I behold upon the night's starred face, huge cloudy symbols of a high romance, and think that I may never live to trace their shadows with the magic hand of chance. So this is all about not getting to express all of the stuff he sees about the world. Before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain. So this is about, there's so many ideas, so many thoughts, so many expressions, emotions, desires that this poet persona fears he will not get to write down. Then at line 9 we have the shift. we have the turn. So in this case we go, "And when I feel, fair creature of an hour, that I shall never look upon thee more, never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love, then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone and think, till love and fame to nothingness do sink." So we get this shift to unfulfilled love, unfulfilled devotion to the other. Unreflecting love is the phrase that Wordsworth uses in line, or that Keats uses, sorry, in line 12. And we get this sort of terrible agony caused by potential that is going to go unfulfilled. This terrible agony caused by a consciousness of future loss. And this sort of, this cripplingness of Keats's fear here, reflected really in this last line very powerfully, "Till love and fame to nothingness do sink," this sort of impossibility of rescuing what's going to be lost. So, we turn now to La Belle Dame sans Merci, which starts on page 923. We have a very different kind of melancholy. And actually, I think we should skip maybe to Ode on Melancholy first, because that probably has more sort of thematic connections with When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be. We'll come back to La Belle in just a second. So we turn to Ode on Melancholy, 932 and 933. We have maybe a more philosophical piece, certainly a much darker poem than the other Keats poems that we've read this semester. We have stanza 1 talking about Lethe, which is the river of forgetting in the underworld in Greek mythology. We have all of these references to poisons, to death, symbols of death. So we've got this very morbid opening stanza. And then stanza 2 gets us to this more sort of philosophical component of melancholy, as opposed to a sort of sense of loss, sense of foreboding. We have a sort of theorizing of melancholy here. And the theory that Keats is developing in stanzas 2 and 3 is that sadness feeds upon joy. So, in contrast to the cliche saying that misery loves company, Keats is here saying that misery loves contrast. Misery loves to see things that are happy. It loves to see a morning rose, rainbows, globed peonies, the mistress's peerless eyes, and things like this. This is what misery wants, because that allows misery to contrast these good things with its own suffering. So Keats says the way to amplify your suffering, the way to really experience melancholy, is to find good stuff, find pleasant things, and reflect on how they're going to die, how they're untrue, whatever it is. And we get this in the last stanza, stanza 3, line 21. It says, "She swells with beauty," she being melancholy here, "she swells with beauty, beauty that must die, and joy whose hand is ever at his lips bidding adieu, and aching pleasure nigh, turned to poison, while the bee-mouth sips." So again, we've got this sort of sense that the thing that feeds melancholy, the thing that feeds sadness, is joy, and the consciousness that joy will be lost, joy will be gone. So, La Belle Dame sans Merci, a ballad, I'm going to turn back to this. I don't really have a transition for it. Just it's a different kind of poem than the other ones that we're reading from Keats. So this is a ballad, and this is based in a sort of romance approach. Ballads were a much beloved genre of the Romantics, partially because the idea was that ballads are a kind of folk song, they're a kind of folk poetry, and this was regarded as a more authentic form of expression than the sort of neoclassical, very sort of educated, highfalutin poetry based on the works of the Greeks and Romans, and so on and so on. This is also a romance. This is neo-medieval. It's about a knight at arms, alone and palely loitering, and his sort of experience with this supernatural lady, a fairy, or an elf, as she's described several times throughout the sort of middle piece of the poem. And so we've got, again, this sort of romantic infatuation with the supernatural, in this case a quasi-Gothic thing, but sort of magic, mysticism, the supernatural, and love, all sort of being rolled into one sort of thematic ball. And then we've got this it's not exactly clear here, but we've got this doom. We've got this sense of doom, this sense of like pursuing love, pursuing beauty, pursuing joy has cost me everything. And we get this in the knight's prophetic dream. He says of this dream, this is stanza 10 and 11, I saw pale kings and princes too, pale warriors, death pale were they all. They cried, La Belle Dame sends Merci, hath thee in thrall. I saw their starved lips in the gloam, with horrid warning gaped wide, and I awoke and found me here on the cold hill's side. And so this is, it's not exactly clear, and this is something that Keats is very interested in, is not clarifying things, is relying on the power of uncertainty, and this is of course connected to his theory of negative capability that we learned about for last week. Somehow this fairy, elf, enchantress, whatever she is, has caused this wandering knight's death. She has entrapped him somehow, and she has made his death inevitable in his pursuit of her and of love. So, very sad week. Sorry.